Exactly.
Good morning and welcome to the month of May edition of the All Provider PLC meeting. We have a fairly brief PLC agenda this morning, and before we get into that, we have a special presentation from Matt Jernigan, who is here as part of our Service Excellence program and presentation. I have a brief background description on him. He has spent 20 years as a touring stand-up comedian, performing at the top comedy clubs in Hollywood. He has been seen on ABC, NBC, CBS. Stop right there. When I was a kid, that's all there was. And ABC really didn't come in all that well. Also Fox, Comedy Central, SiriusXM's Laugh USA. A favorite for corporate events, focuses on speaking to healthcare systems on engagement and communication with the goal of helping to improve the patient experience. Over the past 2 years, he's been a part of the physician shadowing program at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit and has worked with over 700 physicians on best practices and communication skills. Press Ganey has asked he and his colleagues to present this shadowing process at their national conference. He has a bachelor's degree in communications from ECU and is from North Carolina, now lives in the Detroit, Michigan area, so please join me in welcoming Matt Jernigan.
Thank you very much. What an amazing introduction that I wrote, right? I never know really what type of group I'm in front of presenting for, training or teaching. But I do like it when I see blue jeans come into the room. That makes me very comfortable. I didn't know if I should tuck my shirt in or not, and I feel very comfortable with my shirt tail out. But I want to give you a little bit of background, kind of expound on what he talked about in my introduction, because I did do stand-up comedy for 20 years, and a lot of people wonder how I got into healthcare. When I moved to Los Angeles in 1996, I wanted to try to be an actor. And one way to become an actor, back then Seinfeld was huge, and a lot of guys would do stand-up comedy, and they would see producers and things like that, and they would pick them up, that sort of thing. So I put together this little stand-up act. It wasn't really stand-up comedy as much as it was song parodies and impressions. And the reason that I did that is I knew that people loved impressions. I knew people loved music. It kind of brings us all together. And I always was trying to figure out what the audience wanted. I would go down to the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard just so that I could say that I performed there and put it on my resume. There would be 60 or 70 people who would put their name on a piece of paper and they'd put it in a hat and they'd draw out 40 names. The first time that I got to perform in Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard at the Comedy Store was on a Monday night at 1 a.m. for 2 people. And it was the manager and the bartender. And, but that's how you work your craft. That's how you learn. But when I was there with the other comics, and I got to see these, you only got 3 minutes of comedy. You get up there, and they would try to work out their material. And a lot of times it would not, most of the time it would not work because they were there trying to prove to the audience how funny they were. And a lot of these guys come from, you know, dysfunctional backgrounds, and they're trying to work out their issues in front of total strangers. And it's very difficult, but the thing that I knew is if I wasn't connecting with the audience, I would listen to try to figure out what they did connect with. If there was one thing that they laughed at, snickered at, looked at each other about, I kept on with that. And I started developing my act around that. I used the gift of music and comedy to drive it. That's what I did. That's what I knew that I was good at. But I still listened to them to see how to not really manipulate, but just try to figure out how I could be best serving to them. So you can kind of get, you know, a little bit of foreshadowing of how I ended up here, because we are trying to figure out this audience we would call patients, and it seems impossible. But what I did figure out over time is I had probably 30 minutes of material that I could use with every crowd. And I did middle schools when my career was really on fire. I did high schools, I did colleges, I did corporate events, I've done things in bowling alleys for kids' birthday parties and everything in between, every age, just about every state. And so I had to figure that out. That's a large demographic, but could I figure out 30 minutes that would work everywhere? And then I had another hour, hour and a half that I could draw from in that moment. So what I like to try to do in just a few minutes is is give you your like solid 30 minutes, but not 30 minutes, don't worry about that. Give you your solid things that should work with most all patients, and the behaviors that I talk about that you've heard before, the way that I approach it, it's from a different angle, obviously. And if we can figure out how to use 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them every single time, you never miss those people. You never, like when I try to land a joke, you know, to a middle school group, I can't say anything about Elvis Presley. They have no idea who that is. So we have to be able to, you know, drop into things that always work. I transitioned into doing a lot of corporate events, and healthcare companies like to hire me because I like to engage crowds. And they're, you know, you guys have to sit through lots of lectures, you have to read lots of studies. It's still a lot of learning that you have to continue doing. So obviously, you know, I bring some fun and lightheartedness to it and make it a little bit more personable. And when I started doing that, they would ask me to come in and, you know, write material for the programs they had. I've written songs about AID-IT and HEART and all the acronyms and all those things, and I've done music videos for them, and I've done that sort of thing just to, because music can help you remember things. We remember songs from when we were, you know, in middle school and when we were little kids, and it's fascinating. So I was able to use that gift and use it for a noble cause. I got kind of tired of traveling around and just making people laugh for an hour, which I love taking them out of their world for that moment, but I wanted a little something more. And when healthcare companies started letting me get in on it and actually helping them, the first thing that I did an event for Henry Ford a couple of years ago, and they allowed me to present for their champions, all the frontline caregivers who were the best of the best. And I got to get to know them, and I got to shadow them beforehand so I could get an idea. Prior to that, I had very little clinical experience, okay? Since then, I have shadowed 700 physicians. That's been in about 2.5 years, and that means thousands of patients. So I've gotten to see a lot, and I guess I could say I have some clinical experience. So I'm trying to bridge the gap here to the stand-up comic, because, you know, back when I was trying to promote myself to healthcare companies, they were like, you know what, we've had comics before, there just wasn't a lot of depth there. You didn't bring the whole lot of things that we could take with us and actually use when we leave. So now I have a little bit of experience in that, and I use the same tactics. When I got involved with a shadowing program at Henry Ford, when we sat down, I said, if I get to sit down with a physician one-on-one and I just get to know them, I think we can make a difference. But I'm not about coming in and giving them more rules, more behaviors, more lists, more acronyms to follow, because I know that what you guys do behind the scenes after the first few physicians that I shadowed, it's impossible for most people, that they couldn't wrap their heads around it. The work that you do outside of the exam room blows my mind. It's so impressive. It goes beyond. I have the utmost respect for what you do, because you have to deal with policy changes, government changes, insurance changes, billing changes, all these different things that happen constantly. You're up on the studies constantly. Your computer system's got to be upgraded. Every 6 months it seems like something else, something new. And you guys are so professional at saying, okay, if this is the way that it goes, and it's not easy, and it can be very difficult, you take it on and you move with it and you go forward. And then we go out and we ask all patients what's the most important thing, and they say physician communication. So you get all of the credit. You get all of it. You know, we put everything on you. So I said, if I could get to a place where I can benefit the physician, that's where it's at. If I could give you a benefit, I know that the patient is going to benefit. Is there any way that I can see something that they haven't seen from the outside, because I'm the classic observer? When I was in the 7th grade, a new style of music came out, called rap music. Got any rap music fans here? Let me get a little consensus here, because this is how I get to know audiences. By round of applause, got one rap music fan in the back. By round of applause, and how many country music fans? How many rock and roll fans do I have? How many classical music fans? So you guys are just trying to impress the person sitting next to me. Rap music I thought was so creative because two guys could make this music. One guy would do the spoken rhythm rhyme, the other guy would do this thing called the human beatbox. And as I watched these guys, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so creative, the way that they put this thing together. Then I looked a little closer, I'm like, maybe they just stumbled across it, because I can imagine a couple of guys sitting around, one of these guys has a cold, and he realizes that his sneeze has got to be to it. something like this. Now, he's hanging out with a friend of his who occasionally suffers from an asthma attack. His friend is trying to hang in there as best as he can. Something like this. Now, all my asthmatics, y'all feeling that, right? Anytime you got a couple guys making this kind of noise, one of your parents is going to come by and ruin it for you, right? So the combination of one guy sneezing, one guy wheezing, one of your parents coming by to ruin it for you, I think this is where the beatbox really came from. What? What? So that's what the beatbox is. That's the kind of thing that I did in my stand-up comedy act. For people who didn't know rap music, I can make it relatable. So I had to come in and I had to mesh those things together. I couldn't just come out and do it and hope the two guys in here with rap music got it, or thought I was, some guy just trying to be cool. So what I want to do right now is go through some of these behaviors. I like to call them tactics, because I don't think that there's anything about the personalities that I've seen over these past couple of years. Occasionally you run into some people, but for the most part, the amount of time that you have, it sounds like we're adding more time to that. Let me tell you one thing, a few things I'm not doing. I'm not going to give you something that's going to take you more time. I'm not going to tell you how to be empathetic. I'm not going to tell you how to have different types of communication skills. I'm not going to give you any kind of scripts. I can give you some suggestions of how I've seen it work. But I'm not here to get into that part of your psyche when I know that you have, how can I relieve some of the pressure and some of the demand that you get once you walk into that exam room. When patients come in with preconceived notions, they can make up whatever story they want about physicians. They can think that you're in the back room, you're this untouchable person sitting back at your desk with your feet up on the desk, sitting on stacks of cash, looking out your window, drinking wine. They can make up whatever story they want to about you because they've seen it in television, or they feel like their time is more valuable than yours. I'm not here to get into that with you because there's so many patients with so many different stories. And we have preconceived notions about patients. When they walk in the door, the first question they ask are what they're wearing. We all do that with everyone all the time. So I'm not going to do that with you, and I'm not going to tell you that you need to be more empathetic and have a bedside manner. We all need that. We're all working on that constantly. We have that built into us, though. It's like how in a 15 or 20-minute exam, or a 30-minute, or even an hour, how do we squeeze more into it to where we have to sit and listen to long stories, emotional times? And I'm not minimizing it. I'm trying to simplify it, and it actually will make it easier on you, and it will save you more time. And I've gotten to see this work. And like you said, after the first 300 physicians that we shadowed, we looked at all the departments and all their scores, and in that year, the scores went up so high. That's why Press Ganey called us and said, hey, what are you guys doing? Can you come show us? Because the way that we went around about it. I went to a Press Ganey conference a couple of years ago, and everybody was like, how do we get physicians to buy into this? And I go, I don't know, treat them like we're asking them to treat patients. It just seemed like a big disconnect from the people that design these programs, or even corporate or leaders that you don't relate to all the time, and physicians, because they don't get to see behind the scenes. I've gotten to see that. I see all the work that goes in there. So that's what I knew, and I felt like would work. So it's not about me trying to get in there and manipulating your conversation style. What it is, though, is to save you time. And if it's not something that I don't think is a benefit to you, I don't bring it up. I want it all to be a benefit to you. And as I go through, I'm trying to go through 5 of these if I can. I'm not asking you to try to do all 5 of them, but what I will do is I'll ask you to write down 2 of them that you think maybe you don't do all the time, maybe you think will be beneficial. Test one that you might not think works. Maybe you don't think it'll save time. And I don't talk a whole lot about studies because it's based on 700 physicians that I've seen and what I've seen work. So I have a piece of paper there for you, no test or anything like that, but if you can fold it into a quarter, kind of like a lot of you guys do when you walk in to do an exam, when you're writing things down like that. And the first thing that I want you to write down is, can't change it. And that's what I'm talking about with the preconceived notions and stuff like that. There's nothing that we can do about that. We have no control over it at all. So when we get to those points to where the patient, couldn't get an appointment in time, they couldn't get a parking space or whatever, their mom couldn't pick up their kids in time, the front desk couldn't treat them as nicely as they thought, the bathroom was out of paper towel, whatever those things are that they dump on you with their emotion, you can't change it, okay? So a lot of times we go, how am I supposed to control this? And we can't control it, you just can't change it. And that's an easy thing for me, because I can walk into, now I haven't, my job is fun, but there are times when I walk in and I get a very seasoned brain surgeon who has been doing it for 40 years, who wonders what this guy walking in is going to tell him how he can be better. So I have to navigate through that, and I don't expect that, but when it hits me in the face, I had to go through, you know what, I can't change it, how he feels about that. How can I navigate through this? So that's the kind of things that I want to talk to you about really quickly. The first thing is time. Their time, a patient's time. Okay, so this will be, I will tell you 5 behaviors. So write all 5 of these behaviors on another side. Okay, there's only going to be a few things on each one of these things. Their time is more valuable than their health, in my opinion. They don't take the time to take care of themselves. So their other thing that they're more concerned with is money. So it feels like we're taking their time and their money from them, okay? Nothing we can do about that. But when we think about time, the checklist that I used to look at was, if there was a delay, did you apologize? Most physicians do. Now sometimes it's their threshold of time, it's 15 minutes, if it's not that late. But always mention the time. Thank you for your patience. That simple phrase can diffuse a lot of pent-up frustration inside the patient. Thank you for your patience. I know what it took for you to get to this point. You're not apologizing for something that is out of your control, but what you're thinking about is a patient had pain in their shoulder 3 days ago. They couldn't get an appointment for a week, and then they had to call someone, and that person was late, and then they got there, they kind of missed their appointment. They've got to say all these things that are out of our control, or even if they were in the health system's control where you are, and it's not out of your control, they want to hear what the provider has to say. They want to hear the magic that comes out of your mouth, even if it doesn't seem like that. They came to you so that you give them the information that they need. And when, not just physically and for their health benefit, but for their mental well-being, that's what they remember most. They think that because they pay a $40 copay, they get the $1 million worth of information and education and all the things that you can offer them. So it's so out of balance, but if we approach it in the way that they're thinking and say, thank you for your time and your patience, at least they're not angry with the provider, okay? You've diffused that part of it. I'm sorry that happened. We don't like for things to go that way, but you got my time now. Thank you. It's a simple little thing that goes a long, long way. It's a very, very easy one. And we're so caught up with our own time, that we have to make sure that we address it, open up that can of worms just for a moment, address it, and it goes away. Each one of these behaviors I'm talking about makes the patient do this just a little bit more. Makes them relax just a little bit more. They get more comfortable, and they get more clarity, and they're able to hear what you have to say to them. I'm sure you've had patients where you know that they're not listening, and they're waiting for the next question, and they have a glazed look over their face. So this gets them past that. The second thing is a little combination, but you can write it down as, how do you say this? The 2-minute rule. Okay, you guys know what the 2-minute rule is, where you're supposed to listen to a patient for 2 minutes before interrupting. I do believe in that, but I want to tell you how it benefits you. Because you add, okay, 2 minutes for 10 patients today, that's another 20 minutes that I don't have, and they never stop at 2 minutes. The point of that is when they, when you ask them the question and you interrupt them, you're not interrupting because you're rude. The studies say that every 18 seconds you interrupt because that's how you're trained to diagnose a patient. Someone says that my feet are tingling, you're going to ask questions about diabetes. That's just the way that it works. So what you have to do is spend 90 seconds. Just take 90 seconds to let them decompress and tell their story. And you're going to find a lot of things out there. At the 2-minute mark, you can stop them. And you can say, hang on a second. You brought up this. Can we talk about that for a second? You get to drive this. It sounds like they get to drive. They only get to start the drive, and then you get to take it over. But just that little bit of time makes them relax, and it will give you some information that you need. You'll find out what emotional state they're into during that time. They might want to tell you about their vacation. and how their kids are doing and that sort of thing, and they start doing that, say, you know what, I know your time is valuable, but we've got a limited time here, and I want to make sure we address those things. So that can be too. Here's the question that you ask after you've said thank you for your patience. The question that you ask isn't what brings you in today. And this isn't my opinion, but I'm telling you what I've seen work. What brings you in today? Don't you know? Didn't the nurse tell you? I told the doctor. Haven't you read my note? They get mad. If you say, okay, so I hear you've got some pain in your elbow. It's not my elbow, it's my arm right here, right? They get mad. You try to guess it right. You try to leave it open, they get mad. Here's how you can say it. I've looked at your chart. Let them know you've looked at that computer, and please do that. I know sometimes you're room to room. Get a couple of things, just a couple of things about them. I know you're on blood pressure medication. I know you had an accident last year and you were here a few months ago for this. I've looked at your chart. I've talked to your nurse. I kind of know what's going on, but I want to hear from you in your own words what's going on. I've heard patients say, well, I've told it 5 times, but I really want you to hear it. And honestly, we know they've told the story differently 5 times. Partly because they don't know exactly what they're trying to do, and we have to lead them. What kind of pain is it? Is it aching? Is it sharp? You know, that sort of thing. So that's a way to kind of get around those things. And the other part of this is sitting eye level. Sitting eye level with, they feel like the visit is longer. If they're up on the exam table in a gown when you walk in, I suggest, hey, let's sit over here and talk for a minute. I don't know if your room, sometimes I've been in some really bad rooms, the computer's over there and the patient's over here and the chairs are over here. You got to get to a point to where you're sitting across from them like this. If they're way over there, this gesture right here means the world. It may seem awkward and like one more thing I have to do, means the world to them. We're going to sit and we're going to chat. He's got all the time in the world for me, and this little 2 minutes is going to feel 3 times as long to them. The computer, our enemy at times that's over there that we have to get on, that we have to bring up the charts. I see providers trying to work around that so much. First things first is you sit, you chat with them. Then, if you have to go to the computer. Even, and I know people try to do it a better way, even when you go, I just want to open the computer really quickly and pull this up, it becomes primary, they become secondary. It seems like you're in a hurry, I've got to do this thing so that we can do our thing. You come here, you sit, you listen, take that 90 seconds here, facing, sitting, chatting, and then they say something, say, hang on, I don't want to miss this, let me open up the computer. Then the computer becomes secondary, but also important. You're taking notes on them. That's a big one. And again, it makes them feel like it's longer. Sitting makes it feel longer, 2 minutes makes it feel longer. It's no more time for you, and it will save you time in the long run. So that's a tough one, and it's kind of 3-parted. And when we try to choose a behavior at the end, one of the 3 that I brought up is good. Another thing that I want you to write down on a different side of paper is 1 step ahead. That's all we're doing. We're trying to stay 1 step ahead. How are you today, Mr. Smith? Well, if it didn't take me 20 minutes to get in here, okay, now you're digging yourself out of a hole. Right? If you say thank you for your patience, acknowledge the time ahead, then you don't have to dig out of that hole. Say, I've looked at your chart, I kind of know what's going on. You don't have to dig yourself out of the hole. Don't you guys talk to each other, and you're fighting to get back. You know, you're doing a fight you don't have to have. Staying 1 step ahead of them, beating them to the punch. Because we know the things they get set off about. A lot of times we like to try to go in and hope they don't get mad about the time or the chart or any of those things. And if we go in and get ahead of them, then that never comes up. And we're managing that, and we're still driving that scenario. The third thing is teach back, which you've probably heard before. It's probably the most awkward thing providers don't like to do. I've probably seen, I don't know, 5%, maybe 10% of physicians do a teach back, and I think half the time it's because I'm in the room and they know I'm looking for it. But the teach back is a beautiful thing, okay? It doesn't take any more time, because I've seen physicians try to repeat the plan over and over and over again so that the patient gets it. They're still trying to get it. If you say it once, have them repeat it back to you, you'll see what parts that are missing and what they're not. When a patient says it back to you, and there's a couple ways you can say it that I've seen it done well. Number one, it doesn't sound condescending or like you're testing them. If you say, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Do you mind saying back to me what the plan is? Kind of put it on yourself. I want to make sure I communicated everything well with you. Do you mind saying it back to me so we're on the same page? That works, and they'll say it back to you. The other part that I like about it is they're making a commitment to you. I'm going to stop smoking, I'm going to go to rehab, and I'm going to see you again in 3 months. They're making a commitment to you off their vocal cords. Otherwise, they're just sitting there going, and you get a call the next morning going, yeah, he didn't tell me anything I was supposed to do. She didn't tell me what the plan was. I never heard anything. I didn't get this 5-page after visit summary with highlighted notes of when I'm supposed to take my medicine. That stuff just, as hard as we try to get the thing that's supposed to work, we can simply say it to them, have them repeat back to us what it is, and they're a lot less likely. I use this with my son. I tell him, I'm like, I need you to empty the trash in the morning. Before I go to bed, I go, what are you going to do? I'm going to empty the trash. He says it to me, he's reluctant, but the two things he won't say to me is, I didn't hear you, or you didn't tell me. And that's what patients say. I didn't hear him, or he didn't tell me that. But he will say, I forgot. But at least he's, he says, I put it into the universe. I said I would do that. So patients can be just like, 18-year-old boys. So that's a key that really does work. Say it once, have them say it back to you. The fourth one is empathy. Again, not trying to minimize empathy, but I want to show you tactically how it works. They talk about naming the emotion. It's very important. Sometimes hard to figure out. People don't show their emotions. You got all these muscles in their face, and we don't show our emotions anymore. We have this blank stare. They will tell you how they feel subtly. Okay? If parking was bad and the appointment time was bad and they're going through others, they're frustrated. Okay? If they woke up in the middle of the night because their heart was palpitating, they're scared. If they're wondering if they have cancer, they're anxious. We have to kind of diagnose that emotion too. And it's not too hard to do that. So when we figure out what that emotion is, which may happen during that 2-minute conversation, we name it. It sounds like you're frustrated. Okay? A lot of times what we like to do, especially as providers, you want to give them a solution. So let's not that happen again. So we say, it sounds like you're frustrated. Here's what we're going to do to keep that from happening again. We're missing a big, nice, sweet spot. Right after that is the validation. And how do we do that? And there's a few ways you do that. You say, I know that you're frustrated. Anybody in your position would be. They want to know that they're not crazy. Otherwise, if we don't address it and say it makes sense, even if it to us seems irrational, unreasonable, just ridiculous, to that person in that moment, that's how they feel. Therefore, that person in that moment should feel that way. Anybody, you don't have to say that, anybody in your position, but anybody that came from where you came from, whatever, that's the kind of the idea. If it was me, and if you feel this way, if it was me, I would be frustrated too, right? And a lot of times that's true. That's the part, that validation when you say, it makes sense that you are, and I've seen patients go, okay, so I'm not crazy. If you don't validate it, they will continue to try to prove it to you. You can say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, all day, and they'll just keep adding to it. When you say, I see that you were anxious, I can see why. A lot of people would be anxious. I see it all the time. You're not crazy. Then they stop trying to prove it to you. That's where it saves you time. When you do acknowledge that, they stop trying to prove it to you. And that's the beauty of it, and that's what I like about it. It's simple. Name it, validate it, and then say, here's what we're going to do to keep that from happening again. This last one is... I don't know, I get people laughing at me when I suggest it, but thanking the patient. I don't know if you think that's weird or funny or what, or I don't want it to sound like a commercial. Thank you for choosing St. Louis Valley Health. We know you have other providers. Maybe they don't. We're the only ones in the area, but thank you. Just say thank. I started doing this practice a long time ago. When I do a show and it goes well and the client's there and they're thanking me, I'm like, thank you. Like, this is what I grew up to be, and this is what I wanted to do, and that was successful, and you allowed me a place to be. I understand how imbalanced it is, all the work and everything that you're doing, all the schooling. I didn't even talk about this. I usually talk about it at the beginning. But all the time, the fact that you have, gone to medical school or, whatever part of being a provider, you got into it and you stuck with it and decided, and it becomes more and more difficult. I shadowed with an intern. He was shadowing me, shadowing someone, and the lady had been practicing for 40 years. He was going to go to medical school. he asked her for advice. She said, don't go. Don't do it. It's not worth it. Get out now before you get into it. And she's been practicing for 40 years, which 40 years ago probably wasn't quite as crazy and demanding as it is now. So just the fact that you get through that, and then, it's 10 years before you might be in a place that you want to be and want to work, and just putting that much time and energy, and again, all the things that everybody that I see, they're always looking for the new study and these new drugs coming out, and then you got to fight with the opioid crisis and the antibiotics, aren't you? All these different things, and that you stuck with it and that you're here, and the depth. They pay the $40 copay and they get all of that. So it's terribly out of balance. So thanking them can kind of seem a little weird and out of balance. Again, we can't change how they feel. They feel like they're paying so much money for insurance. It's ridiculous and it's getting worse. They shouldn't even have to pay a copay, and then they have to wait and all those things. But simple thank you. I've seen patients go, oh, thank me back. The doctor, the provider, thanked me back. Like the guy with all the wisdom, all the education, all the things that he goes through, he thanked me back. It's an easy way to validate. I appreciate you coming in. I even tell emergency room doctors this. I'm like, thank them, because some people they're having heart attacks and they're not going there because they're embarrassed. Those are the people that need to be thanked. Say, thank you for choosing to do this and take care of yourself. We see a lot of people who waited way too long to come and see us. As a provider, they wait too long and you wish they came in sooner, but still be thankful they came in. They still came in, even after they put their bodies through all this sort of thing. So a simple thank you back, that's an easy one. So right now, of those 5 things, if anything rings true to you, or if you never thought of it that way and you want to try it, or if you think it would be a benefit, a real benefit to you, if there is an issue that you have, that you're trying to overcome constantly in that room, in that short visit, that you want to try this, I don't like to say, even if you don't believe it, but just test it. And the way that we sustain this, just healthcare providers across the country, is you try those things, you may not see the results right away. We got to see the results. It took a year before we got the results back that something was working. We don't know which one of the two or both of the ones. This one lady who was a primary care provider, she started saying thank you, and her numbers started. That's all that she did. I'm not suggesting that, but that one thing changed the way the patient felt about that visit. They assume that you've got to take care of them. You are bound by your oath that you've got to take care of their health needs. It's everything outside of that they remember. That's the experience part of it. And so when you say, you said thank you back to me. There's 6 questions they're asked in the survey. I don't talk about surveys a lot, and I never did unless people ask me about it. I know breast scanning pretty well, and I know how it works, and I know how to influence it. And I don't want to tell you how to take it, how to test it or that sort of thing. But what I do know is there are 2 questions that are asked. One is, did they explain things in a way that you understood, in language that you understood? When they do a teach back to you, when they say it back to you, that gives them a reason to say yes, definitely, as opposed to yes, somewhat. They get 3 answers: no, yes, somewhat, or yes, definitely. Yes, somewhats don't help you. Yes, definitely help you, puts you up. It changes dramatically. So what I like to do is aim at those 5, 10 people who said yes, somewhat, which is a positive answer, but it's not 100%. We don't know if it's 70, 75. It's too vague. But if somebody says, the other question that teach back helps is, did they explain the instructions clearly? Yeah, he actually made me say them back to me. Absolutely, definitely. That's how these influence those. The other ones are, did you feel respected? Did you feel like the visit was long enough? If you want to think about what they're thinking about, it's not did he prescribe the right thing and did the medicine work. It's those sorts of questions that they're going to be asked. And if there's a way that we can stay that step ahead of them and choose some of those behaviors that influence the questions to bump them to a yes, definitely. Because you can see somebody, with scores and the percentiles and things like that, and out of 100 people who return a survey, there may be, 5 people who just said no. These things influence those people to maybe bump them up to a yes, definitely. But there might be 10 people who see it yes, somewhat. We concentrate on those and push them up to the yes definitely, and scores go up by double digits. I mean, it's kind of remarkable how that works. But that's kind of a little bit of what, the way that I look at it as far as your press gainies go. We do this for the right reason. I'm doing this because I think it'll benefit you, period. You can choose to do that because you think it might benefit the patient and benefit the experience for the both of you. If you're having a good experience, if I can do anything to help you create a better experience for yourself, the patient is naturally going to benefit from that. So that's kind of my my thing. There's obviously probably, I've got a top 10. I'll make sure I stay in contact with these guys and kind of email them like some of the other behaviors and kind of what they mean. It's a lot easier when I can see face to face and you can, I'm not trying to sell you on a new way or a new patient experience. I do feel kind of like, I don't know that patient experience as a movement is missing something, or they're doing anything wrong, but they're not thinking of the providers as they think way too much. They're studying patients, and I saw they're skipping right past you guys, and you guys are the key. Not to put pressure on you, but to give you ways that will enhance your experience. So, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me. I really appreciate it.
He's got any questions for Matt before he takes off? He's got a busy day with us, but he's willing to take some questions. Come on, guys. Really? I've got one. So the first thing you talked about was acknowledging their time.
Yeah.
So I've heard other people say it's not as effective to say I'm sorry, but you focused initially on saying thank you for your patience. Want to comment on that?
I do think the differentiation is bringing up the time without apologizing for it. I don't think we're trying to dance around apologizing for it. I believe that just opening up that topic is what we need to do, because I feel like a patient, the last thing I want a patient to do is you've potentially saved their life, and they leave and they've got what they need and they're going to feel better tomorrow because of you, and they're driving home going, I can't believe it took me an hour to get into the scene. I can't believe it took me 3 days to get an appointment. So we have to open up and bring it to them. The apology part, I think the only time when it kind of works as an apology is when you're running behind and you can say, I'm sorry for the delay. But again, I don't know how effective it is to admit to something that really is out of your control. And I think that patients appreciate the transparency of, I realize how big of a problem this is. Does that kind of answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your patience. Just kind of brings out the time issue. Let's talk about it really quickly, because I see what's going on. I'm sorry that you inherited this. It's just like if something is hereditary as far as a disease goes, there's, it's just like, I've seen this before. There's nothing that you did to cause that.
Have you seen a difference in the response rate from patient satisfaction improvement as opposed to different setting of the hospital, say Dick County versus Cedars-Sinai versus rural hospital?
When I was I still work for Henry Ford a lot. They've got, I go to probably 10 different locations, and a 20-minute drive is a whole elite level of demographic. A lot of people that work in that demographic wish they worked downtown Detroit. The level of expectation is high in that one area, and downtown but it's different problems. You're talking overdoses, and you're talking maybe pain medication, and if you're talking about those kind of issues. But I do believe that these particular behaviors and tactics work across the board. Because I did it, because the bigger difference too is departments is the ED, where they may have 5 to 10 minutes to serve someone. In that little bit of time, these behaviors still worked. We have walk-in clinic, where they're seeing 160 patients a day with 5 providers. They can see up to 60 patients in a day, which only gives them 5 minutes. They started using these same behaviors. That's why I like to choose 2. And the one thing I didn't mention is the key is to choose 2 and choose to do them all the time. Because we think we do these all the time. I'll shadow a physician with 3 patients in a row, and I'll say, it helps if we do this. I do that every time. And he didn't do it 3 times in a row. I'm not saying he's lying. We just, my wife tells me, can you not do that And I don't ever never do that. We know I do that, right? That sort of thing. So the consistency. So when you can choose two, any department, any area, those, I think people are still caught up with the same things, especially with empathy. Because if you're talking about an urban community, that opioids is a big issue, that empathy part, where I'm sorry that you ended up in this area. But yeah, across the board, I've worked at lots of different locales. I've worked with people from Stanford and Johns Hopkins, and like I say, downtown Detroit, and it's very, very different, but I feel like it works across the board. Does that help? Yes, sir.
In the last 6 weeks, I told my clinic manager that I didn't ever want to, 2 different patients, I didn't want to ever see them again. And that's pretty rare for me. I don't ever remember saying that before in my career. Is there any tips or techniques that you can use to kind of salvage that relationship? These patients were really obnoxious, really just not interested in anything that I had to offer them, but keep coming back. And any tips on how to salvage that relationship or start anew, and rather than send them down the road for somebody else to have to?
I know. That's a conscientious thought to be considerate of the people that they're going to throw their stuff on next. It's hard without the details of kind of what sets them off. If they were just there for therapy, or you don't know what they're there for you for. I do believe I used to work in a furniture store 20 years ago, and people were impossible. They took up all of our time, and the owner, I'm like, this customer is costing us time and energy and money. We don't have to have every single customer. We wouldn't say, I never want to see you again, but we have to bide our time and that sort of thing. If you want to reconnect with that person, I mean, just simply the way that you put it to me, I think is a really great way to say when you want to, let's start over. Can we start over and see, what am I missing here because I don't feel like I'm serving you? And I know it's a hard place to get because you got a person who's bringing in a lot of baggage and a lot of their own issues because you don't know where they came from. And they're going to put all of that on you. But just for them to see you kind of go, you know what, let's adjust. Let's just change this just a little bit and see how we can do that. For you to be able to make it so the next person doesn't get as bad an experience as you did, that's a tough one, because you've got to somehow figure out what this patient's going on in their mind and their emotions and where they came from. What's your specialty?
Family medicine.
Okay. Yeah. But it's tough. I mean, I don't fault anybody for. I mean, I don't know how the conversation went down, but I don't ever want to see that again. Some people, that's the only way they can respond. Yeah, But I don't know if that helps at all, but just the fact that you're willing to be there in that place.
It's Dr. Defee, actually.
We can go and have a talk, the three of us, on a sidebar conversation. But it's really hard without knowing the details, because I also have, I've seen patients who come in and say, hey dude, if you're not going to give me the dope I need, I'm going to get it on the street. It's like, how do you deal with that sort of thing? And the way that you can deal with something like that is find out, tell them, say, I'm sorry that you got hooked on this stuff 10 years ago by some guy who didn't know what he was doing. I'm sorry that, your family is not taught, that sort of thing. It's like kind of approaching it that way, not going, well, our policy says this, and, those sorts of things that we like to bring up, but just trying to see it from their perspective, it's just really difficult. But that's a lot of humility from your side to want to try to bring that back around. I think it's really impressive, but I have a perfect answer for that. Yes, ma'am.
How do you deal with people that continually say, yes, but?
That's a tough one because we're doing improv. I took improv in California, and the test is say yes and even people who know what the rule is broke it every single time, and we want to give a reason why we can't do that thing. There's got to be a point in the meeting where you remember that you're the driver. You're driving the entire meeting, even if you're giving them a lot of leeway, and to redirect them to a place to where they can at least see your plight, like your situation is, okay, I can't help you here. And I think when we're more open and honest with people and more transparent with them, going, you know what, I'm giving you all the options that I have. and it doesn't seem like they're satisfying you. Without, it's hard because you want to go, what am I going to do for you? You feel like that, but we have to step back and go, these are the only options that I have here. And maybe somebody could treat you better than me because I'm giving you everything that I've got here. And open up and let them know how difficult it is for you. As providers and even in surgeons, I've learned you've got to be certain. The things that you recommend, you have to be certain. So when a patient doesn't respond to your certainty, you want to go, I've been doing that. I mean, you feel that way inside without being a confrontational person. But to go, so what do you suggest I do? I'm giving you all I got here. And just kind of be a little bit more vulnerable in that moment, just so that they see it's difficult for you. Because, again, they make up that story that you've got it all figured out. You've got the education, everything that they should be doing if they're not doing it. And then they're not going to listen to you. They're like our children, We have to just keep telling them and keep telling them and keep telling them. And that's the best we can do, kindly, Does that help at all?
I just appreciate that you talk about us and ways to make our visit more satisfying to us. Because I feel like physician burnout and provider burnout, particularly sometimes in rural health where you're trying to do a ton of things with a small amount of resources. And just saying, okay, like the teach back has been posed to us recently and you're like, how the heck do you have time to do that? And some of our patients are not gonna give you a concise version of your plan that you just need 15 minutes for. So I appreciate that you're just focusing on this and us, because I feel like a lot of times, again, more stuff, just do this, more charts, more, completely more timely, blah, blah, blah. So thank you for that, because I think you do give some very articulate things to help us be more satisfied.
Oh, good. You're welcome. That's the first thing. I wrote a song for a group called Physicians Are People Too. Like, we're missing this. You guys have homes and families. You want happiness and satisfaction, and people just got a version of providers and doctors that this elite lifestyle that you live. When I see people working all day, 5 days a week for people who are unsatisfied, who say yes but, and people you have to say I don't want to see you anymore. That's hard. That's not what you want, and you guys really care. You've chosen a noble profession. There aren't other jobs that stay as demanding as this. It can seem. I mean, even as a lawyer, the laws aren't changing every single week. Like policies change, and it's all about the patient, all about the patient. And it can be clothed in that way, and it's just, I have to be honest and true and show people and be transparent with the people that I report to. When I go back, I go, listen, these people are working their tails off. Let's give them something that helps them and not gives them one more thing to do. Because what you're great at is they say, oh, by the way, you got a chart within 20 minutes now, or you got to see 15 patients instead of 10 today. And you're like, okay, that's what you're built for that. So then when it comes to this sort of thing, it's just like, great, one more thing that doesn't necessarily have to do with their health. That's your goal. But obviously, if we can bring their heart rate down a little bit by us acknowledging their emotion, that helps. But thank you I'm glad that comes across. I'm in it for you guys, to help that.
Did you ever think about medical school?
Never. No.
You followed 700 of us. You've got a pretty good shot.
The more I've seen, the less I want to. Every time you think you've seen it all, you haven't seen it all. But it's amazing to me. I mean, it is. I don't blow smoke, and I don't bring things up that I don't believe. It is above and beyond. I don't know how you do it. And I mean, forget the whatever, rectal bleeding kind of stuff, that, all that other stuff, forget that. I mean, I'm okay, most of it, I can stay around, but it's just the amount of things that continue to change, and that you still have, and you have to continue to grow. It's like, if a PhD has devoted his life to research. I'm going to research and read for the rest of my life, kind of thing. And you've devoted yourselves to keeping people healthy. which we're making it harder and harder for you to do that. You know, people are going the opposite direction and you're trying to rail them back in. And then the policies that get kind of placed on you are ones that keep you from doing the sort of things that I think are helpful. So, but no, not a consideration.
Yeah, when you have to start out the day going, okay, this is the plan, and I know that by the end of the day, it's going to look completely different than it did at the beginning, and you just go in knowing that.
Yeah, yeah. And I used
You
to,
know.
a lot of times I brought up improv really quickly. That's what you're doing every time. And I recognize this when I walk into an office and the doctor says to me, do you know how offensive it is that you're gonna come in here and tell me how to do my job after I've been doing this for so long? I didn't know that. If I was planning on that, I would have come in standing up a little straighter. But that wouldn't work, right? So I go in and I go, hang on a second, Jack, you know, that's not why I'm here. So that's what you do when you walk into a patient. You never know what's gonna happen. But it's actually it can be kind of exciting and fun, especially when you get past it. The stuff that's predictable isn't quite as fun. It's the stuff that you hit the wall and you get through it. That's the stuff where we learn and grow and we're like, oh, I can do this, so.
This is more like a comment, sorry. Like, beginning of this year, like, I wanted to really focus on like 3 things that I wanted to change for my patient satisfaction score. And I learned that some of the things that you think you're doing right, some of the patients throw back in your face. They cannot use that to say like, throw out the whole baby, the bathwater.
Right.
Like, for example, I was explaining to this patient that with a Medicare wellness visit, you can't order all these things because it's a different type of visit.